Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us so early, Friday morning. I'll just give another couple of seconds, let people join. Lots of people joining so far. Fantastic. Okay, good amount of people joined today. That's fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Stuff. So good morning, everybody. The line is muted, obviously, just to keep out background noise. My name is Jonathan Reinhardt. I'm a technical consultant here with Diatech. Day to day, I'm providing BIM consultancy services to our customers, whether that's training, implementation, customization of Autodesk Construction Cloud, Revit, Navisworks, all of that good stuff as part of any sort of BIM related construction or civil engineering type project, and particularly in the context of ISO 19650. So this series that you've joined us here for today, this is part of a series we run on the first Friday of every month. That's called the Design and Construction Technology series. So you're all very welcome. If you haven't been to one already, we've been running it since I think last September, and had great success with it in terms of engagement with customers and just sharing our knowledge that we have about various BIM workflows, Autodesk kind of cloud, construction cloud, and all of that good stuff that plugs into our construction and design stage processes. So just a brief background, I'm a chartered architectural technologist, worked in BIM management, BIM implementation prior to working for Diatech, and my prime area is in the architectural industry, but very familiar with construction workflows as well. So what we're going to look at today is we're going to look at Autodesk Construction Cloud, but we're going to drill in on a specific area of that, and that is the RFI workflows, which are contained within a particular product inside the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So just for those of you that may not be aware of the Autodesk Construction Cloud, sorry, I'm just going to check the chat box, make sure. Okay, perfect. So I'm happy to take questions, by the way, in the chat box. I will get to them if I can during the slides and the presentation. I will be going into live demonstration, and I don't like to rely too much on slides. So put your questions in the chat box, and I'll certainly get to them if I can within the allotted time. So Autodesk Construction Cloud, just for those of you that are not aware, it's made up of lots of different features and functions and all this useful stuff for construction and design related projects as well, for building civil engineering projects. So the areas that it covers are things around design collaboration, coordination, clash detection, quantification, project management, cost management, quality, safety, all of that kind of great stuff. And the backbone of Autodesk Construction Cloud is that it's a cloud-based tool, either accessed in a web browser or through a mobile or tablet app, which I'll be able to show today. And it's known as the Autodesk Construction Cloud. And the particular area that we're going to focus on today, just to kind of specify where we'll be looking at. So Autodesk Docs, we've looked at that previously. That's your main common data environment inside Autodesk Construction Cloud. But on top of that, you have 3 different products or subscriptions. So Autodesk Docs, it can be bought as a standalone subscription, by the way, or company-wide subscription, unlimited licensing. All of that is available as well. BIM Collaborate Pro, Autodesk Takeoff, and they're kind of 4 key products that we see here: Docs, Collaborate Pro, Takeoff, and Build. So what we're going to be looking at today is actually Build. And within the Build function, we're going to be looking at one of the functions within Build. It's quite extensive, lots of other stuff in there, checklists and health and safety checklists and cost management and variation management of projects as well from a financial perspective. But all we're going to be looking at is just RFIs. I want to kind of drill down into within Autodesk Construction Cloud how RFIs work, and potentially if you're subcontractor on site requesting information from a designer, how does that work? Or maybe your main contractor working on, managing a project on site from a construction management point of view, how do you manage your RFI? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show that process today, how it works in Autodesk Construction Cloud, and hopefully demystify some of those workflows for you that may be new to them as well. So to kind of break it down very briefly, specific to what I'm going to show today. So I'm going to look at maybe, there's a plumber or mechanical team on site, and they're looking for a specific radiator spec from the architect that maybe has specified it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how that process works today. So, let's start, with the plumber on site, or, whoever's installing the particular items on site, and they need to get more information from a designer. They put through a request effectively for a piece of information, an RFI effectively. The process of how that works inside Autodesk Construction Cloud is that it's generated by potentially the person on site, mobile app or mobile device or tablet or anything like that. It goes to the main contractor, which is known as, there's a role designated to them in the platform. It goes to the main contractor. The main contractor then decides, okay, can the main contractor respond to this RFI, or does it need to go to the designer? Then they would forward it on to the architect. And that's all a managed process inside the system once I get into it now in a moment. Once the architect gives back a response, it comes back through the main contractor, or it could be somebody representing the main contractor. It could be their document controller, or maybe it's a representative on their behalf, a third party perhaps. And then it comes back through the main contractor and then moves back to the plumber with the response, or back to the person on site with the response from the architect, for example. So it goes through this process. There are ways to change this process, by the way, but just, I suppose, at a very high level, this is typically how it works. We can have something called an RFI coordinator inside of this process as well. And again, that could be an RFI manager or coordinator on behalf of the main contractor, behalf of the client. It just depends how you want to slot them into your process as well. So there is malleability to this type of process as well. Once we get into the platform, then there's specific roles or terminology that the Autodesk Construction Cloud uses that may be slightly different to what you use on site. But just what I want to do is I want to break down what those roles are in the context of the platform. So the plumber or the person on site, potentially the person creating the RFI, they're known as the creator. So they create the RFI. The main contractor is known as the manager. So that's the role that they have assigned to them in the process. And I will show this once I get into the platform in a couple of moments. And then the architect is known as the reviewer. So they're the person reviewing the information, the reviewer, and they submit what's known as the official response as well. So they may attach the specification for the radiator, or a link to their manufacturer, supplier document, or anything that's relevant to that as well. And we're going to look at how that all works in the platform. So the main contractor, then, I said, is the manager. So it comes back to the manager, starts with the creator, goes to the manager, then to the reviewer, back to the manager, and then back to the creator as well. So that's a cycle effectively. The last one of plumber, obviously it comes back to the start of the line. When it gets to the end, it comes back, and it can be rejected, voided, creating new versions of the RFI if it's been rejected or the correct spec hasn't been provided. So then, just to recap on what I showed there, the RFI roles are creator, manager, and reviewer, and then you can optionally have something called a coordinator, and the coordinator will sit in between these roles somewhere within this process, and they can add extra coordination within there as well. And obviously that's going to depend on the complexity and scale of your project. The coordinator may not be required, or a coordinator may be the same individual as the main contractor or as the manager as well. So that's why the system can be designed to suit the complexity, however small or however large your project is. The system allows that type of customization. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump into, I have a bit of a kind of example set up in the background. So I'm just going to go to my project. I'm just going off screen for a moment, and just so I can come back in here, and I'm just going to go to my sample project. So just to explain how I'm going to sign out of the platform. So because Autodesk Construction Cloud is web-based or app-based, you obviously need to sign into it. I sign into it with my email address purely because my license is associated with my email address. So everybody signs in with their unique email address, you know, more than likely going to be their organizational or their company email address that they use every day. I'm signing in with my DiaTech address. This is going to bring me into Autodesk Construction Cloud. It's going to show me all the projects that I'm a member of. But what it is also going to allow me to do is going to allow me to go to any project that I want to access now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in the name of the project. It's kind of a project based on an airport, not a real airport, by the way, but my own sample airport. So this has brought me into my specific project that I'm a member of. And let's say I want to manage my RFIs effectively. So I'm coming into my project. And just to explain what I'm in here, I'm actually in an Autodesk build project, but I do also have access to the other modules on that same project. So if I'm at design stage, I might be using something like design collaboration or clash detection and model coordination. But to use RFIs, I actually come into the build area here. And this is known as the module selector. I can jump between any module and I'm still within the same project. I can see my folder structure, file structure. So I can see my CDE or, access any files that maybe I have access to as well in here. So this is primarily where all of your design files, documentation, specifications will be stored. RFIs then, so once it comes to site stage, obviously all of this design information is quite relevant, whether it's a Revit model, BIM model, IFC model, a set of drawings, multi-page PDF, CAD files, all of that stuff is stored inside that files area that we looked at. But when it comes to site stage, and let's say we're ready to maybe use that information even to generate RFIs or align it with RFIs, we come into the build area. So if I come into the build module, I'm going to see a number of different options here on the left-hand side. So I can see sheets, files, RFIs. If I go into files, I'll see the same folder structure that I was in a moment ago. So that's where all that design information and drawing documentation is stored within here, depending how I customize this folder structure. That's entirely up to the organization or the project. I can see the various different types of folders and shared, work in progress, and published area perhaps. So that's all customizable. So if I want to generate an RFI on site, so let's say I am a plumber or subcontractor working on site, I need to request more information. So before I get into that specific process, just to show you, so what I'm seeing here is I'm seeing effectively the user interface just for RFIs. So I click into RFIs, and it shows me all of the RFIs outstanding or maybe open or closed on a project. So I can see on this project, quite a small number of RFIs. I'm sure you'll agree, just 25. And obviously, projects have a lot more RFIs, hundreds or thousands, if not, depending on the complexity. And what I can see in this dashboard is I can see each unique RFI. Every RFI has a unique ID number. So this unique ID number is automatically applied whenever I create an RFI or if someone on site creates an RFI. So what that allows me to do is obviously then I can track different RFIs. I can see, okay, well, this one is opened, this one's in review, it's open, but it's in review, this one's closed and closed. So what I'm seeing here is lots of different statuses of RFIs. I can see who's responsible, the title of the RFI, and I can even see a location. So if I see the location, it means I can report on a location effectively. I can report on, room 406. I want to see all of the RFIs for that location. And I can navigate through here. I can click into each individual RFI if I want to. So I can go, okay, well, what was actually happening with this RFI? And I can see the process that this RFI went through. So this is specific to this RFI number 560. And in this case, it was about clarifying the pump height, for example, on site. And I can see the process that went through, whether it's closed or opened. I can see that. I can see that any of the activity log here on the right-hand side. So I can see the location was defined at the very start. So this is kind of a chronological story, if you like, of how the RFI has evolved from, the open status up to the closed status. So every time an update occurs in the RFI, it's recorded inside the activity log, and I can export this to a report if I really want to as well. So that's typically what an individual RFI looks like once I go into it. If I just come back to my main dashboard, I can in here, if I want to filter on, for example, I want to come in here and let's say I want to filter on just, room, for example, if I just type in 406, I just want to filter on room 406. It's only going to show me, obviously, RFIs that are associated with a specific room. And that's because of the location information that we have in there. As a result of that, then I can generate various different reports. I can run reports, and that will actually come into my report section, and we will look at that before we finish up this morning. So there's a couple of different ways I can create RFIs. The most likely way to create an RFI is probably going to be on a mobile device. And 2 seconds while I grab my iPad, 1 moment. Apologies, my iPad was on charge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my iPad screen. So 2 seconds, I'm going to log into the Plan Grid app. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to assume, so if I share my screen here now, 1 moment. So I'm going to log into the app. So I'm going to come out of the desktop version. Cool little app here that lets me do this. There we go. Okay, so now, so I'm going to come into, so I'll minimize what's in the background. Minimize that in the background. I'm going to open up. Okay, so here I am on my iPad being shared to the screen. So I'm logged in here as the plumber. Let's remind myself I am. So I'm logged in here as the tradesperson on site. I am there, Joe Plumber, that's me. So I'm logged here on site, maybe I'm on site, in a bathroom or a room, and I need to find out the radiator spec. And that's the process I'm going to go through. So what I'm actually going to do here is, so it's the first time I've used the app today, so I just need to sync it briefly. So that's going to sync that project to my mobile device. So I can come into this is the project I'm working on, and I can see lots of other different information. I can see other outstanding RFIs, I can see checklists, and even go into drawing sheets and stuff like that as well. So I can look into various different drawing sheets. But if I want to create an RFI, what I would do is come into the app, I'd go to RFIs, and I can see other RFIs that I've generated here. I'd create an RFI. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put in title, and I'm going to go rad spec. I'm going to call it rad spec. And let's say lobby WC. Okay, so I'm just going to give it a kind of a detailed enough title so that it's identifiable, once someone looks at the title. So then as the plumber, I can go, okay, well, what's the question I need to ask? So, rad spec, please. I'll keep it nice and brief. It should be clear enough. And then a question mark and a question mark. Yeah, there we go. Rad spec, please. And what I can do, I could, if I wanted, I could take a photograph of the empty space of where the rad should go. Maybe not relevant. I can add in a photograph if I want. I can add in a photograph. You're just looking at my desk there now. So I could take a photograph if I want. I could associate that with the RFI if I needed to. I'm not going to. It's probably not relevant right now. And you can see the status of that RFI is set into draft. So again, let's say I'm the plumber here, and I can go create. So what I've done is I've created that RFI. So now it's still in draft stage, as you can see. It's still in draft stage. So I'm still the plumber here on the actual device. And a couple of things that it's recorded here that you'll notice. So it's recorded the responsible party. So the company I work for is Mechanical People Limited. So it records that automatically in the RFI. So somebody will know who it started with effectively. It will both know the individual, and it will know the company that they're associated with as well. Other things it does here, so it will allow me to put in a unique ID if I want. I can give a due date. Maybe, I'm not required to. I can give a due date, maybe I could say 1 week because, let's say the radiators need to be ordered next week or tomorrow. So I can say, okay, well, I need a response by, we'll say the 8th of March, which is Wednesday. I need a response by that date. So all I'm doing is just adding a bit more detail here as the plumber. I can add lots of more specific detail if I really want to. And I can, again, quickly choose, okay, well, it's, let's say it's Terra 1, it's 4th floor, and it's room, we'll go to 406 again. It's room 406. So that room 406 is just allowing me to, again, from a reporting point of view, it records room 406 for me. So there's lots of other information I can put in here as well. What I want to get across here is you can create RFIs very quickly. You don't have to click every single question. what I want to show you is that there's not too many clicks if you don't want there to be. What I'm trying to show you here is that you can add that extra detail if you want to as well. So I'm going to create this nice and quickly. Create an RFI, rad spec lobby WC. So it's going to get submitted to the manager. So the manager in this case is the main contractor. Submit to manager, and it's just kind of giving me a little bit more detail. I can then choose the manager if I want. Maybe it's a different manager, and I can give them a due date if I want. So I'm going to leave that blank for now. So once I press submit, it's going to go into the manager. So that's now submitted to the main contractor. And what I'm going to do very quickly as well is I'm going to create another RFI, a very quick one. I'm going to say, okay, well, I need the rad spec, you know, for WC changing rooms. So I'm going to create another RFI very quickly. So I'm actually going to leave, I can leave the title the same as the question. So copy, paste. What I want to show you here is how quickly I can actually generate an RFI. Okay, yeah, ready to submit that. And now I'm going to submit that. So I've sent 2 RFIs effectively there. The second one, I want to show you how quickly you can actually do it. You need the title and the question. They're the main things of an RFI. I think hopefully most of us will agree. I can add lots more detail. So on the iPad device, what I can see now is I can see any of my RFIs that are relevant to me. I won't see RFIs from other subcontractors. I mean, I don't need to know what the electrician's asking for, what the plasterer is asking for, unless it's relevant to me. So these are now sitting with the manager. I happen to be the manager in this case for the main contractor. So now there's an action on me to do something with this RFI. So what I'm going to do now is going to come out of the iPad for a moment. So I'm just going to minimize that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in here as the main contractor. So I myself, Jonathan Reinhardt, are acting as the main contractor. I've received an RFI from the plumber, and I can come into my dashboard. I will have received an email, by the way, when notification of an RFI has been submitted. Would have received that straight away. So there's a couple of ways I would have received ping, and I can come in here and go into the specific RFI. If I also just go back to my home screen, what I can also do is I can actually see RFIs that are relevant to me or I'm involved with as well. So if I go to either of these RFIs, because I'm an administrator, I kind of have a bigger view of more RFIs. And if I actually come in here, it will show me a list of RFIs that are relevant to me now. So if I just filter on the ones that were done today. So there we go. So those top 2. So there's the two that have just been submitted by the plumber. So rad spec lobby WC, rad spec for changing rooms. So now as the main contractor, I'm going to come in here and go, okay, well, do we have enough information to send it to the architect? So what I'm doing here is the main contractor. I can decide, I can either close the RFI and say, well, actually, you know, you have the spec already, for example, or, you know, we're not putting a radiator in there anymore, you know, going to be some other type of heating device. So I can, at this point, I can choose to send it back to the plumber, or I can choose to send it on to the reviewer. The reviewer in this case is going to be the architect or the designer maybe who specified it, or I can close the RFI. So a couple of decisions I can make there as the main contractor. And what you'll notice here on the right hand side, I can see that activity log of when it was created. So this is all just recorded in the last couple of minutes and telling me the status. You know, Joe Plumber submitted it to Jonathan Reinhardt on behalf of the main contractor. There is a comments that will be recorded in here as well. And you can also respond in the comment by response email as well. So if you received an RFI, if you reply to that email, you know, you can put in, you know, spec is radiator type, you know, ABC 92 or whatever the case is. That will come back into the activity log by email as well. So that's a very powerful integration. We've only added in the last 10 months, as far as I remember. So now, as the main contractor, I'm going to say, okay, well, I'm ready to submit this to the architect. So it's going to go into what's known as a workflow. It just reminds me here of the architect. Now, I could select other members if I wanted to. So, you know, maybe the fire consultant has to approve this as well. I could also bring them into that workflow if I wanted to. But I'm going to keep this really straightforward. I can add in co-reviewers and add in other detail here. So I'm just going to submit this. This is now going to come to the architect. So this has now come to the architect. In this case, it's Nathan Orr. It's Nathan Orr in this case. The manager at any point, by the way, does have the power to also answer on behalf of the architect if maybe they had that information. So now, as the main contractor, I'm going to log out, and we're going to look at what the actual, we're going to look at what the architect sees. So let's say the architect has received its RFI. If I remember correctly, I just need to log in as that architect. So again, forgive me if I'm bouncing between a lot of different people here, but obviously the purpose of it is to demonstrate the process between different users. So I'm logging in as the architect. There we go. In here is the architect. I need to come into my project. I will have received an email, by the way, and I'll actually show you that email on screen. I'll just go off screen for a moment. There we go. So I will have received, the architect will have received this email to say, you know, the main contractor, Best Builders, their company, assigned the following RFI to you. So there's that RFI, it's number 0579. The status of it, the ball in court, so who the responsibility is with, is currently the architect. The question, and a couple more details, and who submitted it as well. So Joe Plumber. So if I knew Joe, or if I was standing beside Joe, you know, maybe I could have a conversation with him because I know who submitted it. So the architect receives this email and they go view RFI. That's going to bring the architect directly into the RFI straight away. You can control the notifications, by the way. It can be instantly, hourly, or daily that they get it. You know, they'll get all their RFIs at once. Depends on how many you have flying around on the project. It can be useful, or obviously it can be noise as well if you're busy enough trying to do your job. So again, if I had it clicked on that link, it would have brought me in. So what I'm going to do as the architect, come into my RFIs panel, be able to see those RFIs. Now I could actually, I'd come to my home screen. So just give me a moment, come back to my home screen, and I'm going to see there's 5 RFIs. And what I'll also see is, any overdue RFIs in here as well. So I don't think this one is overdue. So I'm just clicking into my number of RFIs. There's the RAD spec lobby one, so room 406. As the architect now, I can see this. I can now do something called submit that official response. So submitting the official response is me going back to the plumber and go, here's the spec. This is what you need to install or order. So I can do a couple of different things here. So I can add a comment. So I could actually go, back to straight away. I could tag the plumber and I go see spec attached. Or I could add, I could potentially ask him or her a question if I needed to clarify further information. But I'm just going to put in a comment here, spec attached. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to attach the spec. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to submit my official response. So submitting an official response moves it on in the process. But what I need to do first is I need to add a reference. So that reference is the file that I want to add. So what I can do is I can link in a specification document, or I can upload a new document. So what I'm going to do is I have an RFI. I'm going to go into my RFI. So I have an RFI RAD spec here. Could be a PDF, in this case, a JPEG. This is the RAD spec. I'm going to upload the files. So this is going to associate the RAD spec. If we click on that, this is what the plumber is going to see effectively. The plumber is going to see this document, JPEG in this case. So there's the RAD spec. They're getting that information back. That's what's being sent to them. So it's attached down there. I can submit the official response. I can say open, answered, or if I want to reject it. So I'm going to say the spec. So the official response is what's recorded as official to the RFI. The comments is probably more the in-between communication that might happen if more information is needed. So the spec, press submit on that. So this now comes back to the construction manager or the main contractor. So now I'm going to log back in as the main contractor. And what you'll see now as the architect, I actually can't do anything with this. I've released it and it's moved along the process to the main contractor. I can add comments, but I can't change the status. I can't change my response. It's now back with that individual. I could duplicate it and create a new revision of that, by the way. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to log back in as the main contractor. Here we go. So all I need to do, I'm just going to refresh this. I'm in here as myself, which is the main contractor. I've received this RFI back, and I can quality check this before it gets back to the plumber and make sure it's something we've priced for, or we've costed for, or we've included in our tender. I can make sure I'm happy with that. I can close and distribute it and go, okay, yeah, I'm happy with that. If I want to, I could push it back to the architect. If I wasn't happy with the spec that was attached here, I could open up this and I go, okay, well, actually, that's not what we priced for. That's, a more expensive radiator, or, that's a different spec than we've allowed in our spec. So quite simply, I'm going to close and distribute it. So closing and distribute it, sends it back to the plumber. It sets the status as closed. The plumber now has the RAD spec that he or she needs. So I'm going to close the RFI. So the status of that closes, and you can see it's approved, and everything is recorded in here. So the file reference that was attached, any comments that were added, either by myself or someone else, they'll be recorded in there, and all of the information that was captured initially is still in here. So the location of that, again, meaning that we can actually respond or create reports based on a room number effectively. So now if I come back into RFIs, what I'll see, I have a filter on there. So what I'll see is the status of that RFI has actually changed from open to closed, and that RFI is now complete. Now, what the plumber will see is they will have received a notification response, and they will have received an email to this to say it's now approved. They'll see the spec, and then they can order or install whatever radiator they need to install as well. So that's very simply, that's the process. I've probably shown you some other elements that you can add into it if you want. I try to keep it as straightforward as possible, but just to understand that process quite simply is that it starts with a creator, in this case the plumber. It goes to the manager, in this case the main contractor, then to the reviewer, who is the designer. In this case was the designer, it could be someone else obviously. And then they send it back to the main contractor. Main contractor says, okay, I'm happy with that. And then they send it back to the creator, and then the plumber or the person on site has their piece of information that they need. So that closes that RFI effectively. To understand that RFI then in a bit more detail, what I'm going to show you is just briefly, I'm going to show you some of the reporting. So let's say you did want to generate a report on all of your RFIs. A lot of RFIs happening on the project. You want to see, for that specific room number that I've already generated a report. So in order to do that, I create a filter in here, filter on my location like I showed, unit number, tower number, whatever it is. And as soon as I press export, that generates my report for me. So obviously this is reporting everything for me as I see here. But if I come into reports, I'm now going to see a PDF version of that report that I generated a couple of moments ago. So there it is, RFI summary. And what I can actually do is I can download this report. So this report now can be emailed to anyone. And this is a summary of RFIs, in this case for room 406, created by this person in this case. And we can see our logo is included on that. So you can customize your logo to be included as part of that as well. I can see all of the open RFIs that are on room 406. And I can also see the closed one, or in this case based on the filter, and I can see any of the comments. So all of this is available to whoever receives this report. So because this is a PDF report, it also includes hyperlinks. So if someone receives this report, maybe it's document manager, or somebody in the project that's maybe auditing or checking back RFIs for that week, they can go, okay, well, this one is still open, pipe spec. They can click on that ID number, and if they have access to the platform, if you've added them to the project, it will bring them into that RFI as well. So those live hyperlinks are integrated into all of the reporting as well. The other thing with the reporting to understand is that you can also schedule reporting to happen as well. So this was just kind of an on-demand report, and that was a summary report. I could have also generated a detailed report. So I'm going to show you, this is a detailed report I generated yesterday, as you can see. A detailed report then will include a lot more information with the RFI. So if there's photographs associated with it, all of the activities in that RFI, and lots of other information that's associated with, a specific RFI. If there's any files associated with it as well, I can click on that, it will bring me into the file. So reports are quite, they're quite interconnected to the platform, even if they're just PDF. But if I wanted to schedule a report, for example, what I can also do with reports is I can schedule reports that are maybe RFIs that have gone past their deadline. So I've created something called a template, and I'm just going to show you this template of a report. This is purely just a report. So what it will do is it will look for the status of a report. So I filtered it on, okay, well, I only want to see 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe I only want to see open or in review for this one. And the due date is overdue. So that means it will only pull RFIs based on that. I could also say, well, you know, I want to find one that was, you know, created by only by, you know, the plumber in this case, not to be so hard on the plumber. I only want to find RFIs that are overdue and that have been created by the plumber. So that's something else I can filter on. I'll just take that out for a moment. So what I'm going to do is going to save that template. So now that's a template, but what I can do is I can schedule that report. So I can go, okay, well, look, every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I will be kind, with every second day at 8 o'clock, I want the platform to send me a report. So it will automatically generate a report. And I can choose to share it with, you know, maybe it's everyone in the main contractors, and maybe it's also the mechanical team. So I can send a report of RFIs that are overdue, and it will repeatedly send, and it will only send RFIs that meet that filter effectively. So if some of those RFIs have been closed out, it's going to be different on the Friday versus the Wednesday or the Monday. So it's going to be sent to mechanical people limited every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8 o'clock. I can change that, by the way, as well. And I can say, okay, well, it only needs to run for the next 6 months, for example. Maybe that's when their contract is up. I can also put in email addresses here if I want for people to receive it. And I can say it's weekly or monthly, even if I really want to. I'm going to save that schedule. So that is now scheduled to run for that particular, for those particular times. It will start. It's going to start today, effectively. The first one will be Monday, obviously, because it's gone past 8 o'clock. But if I said, okay, well, I actually want to run a report now, I'm going to run this report now and can generate a report. It may take a couple of moments, but it's going to be based on those filters as well. So if I wasn't ready to wait for the scheduled one, I wanted to see them straight away because I know the plumber's going to be coming back to me, or mechanical people limited will come back to me on Monday at 8:30 saying, you know, what's happening here. So now if I generate that report based on those filters, I'm going to see a series of different information. In this case, it's overdue. This one's overdue by 146 days. And it's only ones that have been overdue and are open for submission as well. So again, that's based on that filter, and that was an on-demand report that was actually produced from something that will be scheduled anyway. So this is what will be sent every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8 o'clock. And again, it will update automatically as part of that as well. Other things to show you how to use RFIs in a bit more detail. So what we looked at there was a very straightforward RFI being generated, or 2 RFIs being generated. I could have gone into a bit more detail, and I could have generated RFIs and linked it to other types of information. So let's say that other RAD spec RFI that I did look at. So I'll just take this. This is a different one, lobby sync spec. So this is a different one. It tells me who it fits with. So either someone on site, or, you know, maybe the main contractor that's managing this process, they could have also associated other information with that RFI. They could have added a photograph. They could have added another RFI to that RFI that's maybe relevant to the same space or same room. They could have also done that as well. Or they could have also linked it to an asset. So an asset in this case is another module within Autodesk Build. So assets can be, I mean, they can be radiators, they can be AHUs, they can be desks or windows or doors or rooms or spaces. So what we could have done here, we can go, okay, well, you know, this is, and I'm going to find another one that's a radiator, because I have a radiator asset. That's what I want for that. Rad, there we go. Radiator spec, and that's still open. Yeah, for changing rooms, this is the one. So maybe this has come to the manager now, and the manager goes, okay, well, you know, we can actually link that to a BIM object inside the platform. So I'm going to go assets, and I'm going to type in radiator or AD. I'm going to type in radiator, and I know I have different types of radiator assets. I'm going to say, well, it actually belongs to this radiator, and this radiator, all these radiators carry that spec. What I'm doing is linking it to the asset. I'm going to add the 5 assets, and I'll show you the benefit of adding it to the assets. What we now see is the assets are now connected into that RFI. So if someone comes into this RFI, the architect, for example, so now the contractor has linked this into the BIM model, because those assets come from the BIM model, and I'm going to show you that on screen in a moment. So it's moved on to the architect. And what I'm going to do now is actually log in as the architect again. I'm going to come back here, I'm going to log in as the architect. I'm going to look at that other RFI. So again, that RAD spec, type in here, RAD spec for changing rooms. So here's this one that sits with me. there's all of what we call the assets. And I go, okay, yeah, there's an RFI. What radiators are they talking about? I click on these assets, and it's going to bring me into the assets module and build. I should have permissions. They may need to be turned on. Perfect. So it brings me into the assets module and build. And what that actually does is, if I click on this asset, so this asset has the RFI now associated with it. It's bi-directionally built in that connection. But you may be asking, well, why is he showing us the assets? These assets were actually pulled from an RVP model or a Revit model. So if I actually click on this object now, this model, it's going to show me exactly where that radiator is on site. So I can go, okay, which radiator are they talking about? There it is there. It's the one in this particular unit. It's highlighted it there for me. And I go, oh yeah, now I remember where that spec is. And I can actually see the other radiators. That is directly connected to that. It was highlighted just because the glass is showing there. So this is a Revit ID actually that's been pulled from the model. And what I can still see in here, I can see that RFI as well. So this has been connected purely because the main contractor connected it. But because I'm a designer, I can now see that asset in my model. This model sits inside my files area, inside my Autodesk build files area, my Commandant environment. And this Revit model, I mean, this could have been produced by the designer, and they could be using things like design collaboration to update the model as well. So that is a live link that you can also connect things like assets, other RFIs. You can even connect in potential change orders as well as part of that. And just for this radiator, I can't see other activity for it as well. But again, it shows me that RFI. I can go, okay, I'm happy to submit a response now. I know the spec of that RFI. I know where it sits in the model. I can come back into my RFI area, and now I can link in my spec if I wanted, the same way I did with the other one. Link in my spec, either navigate to a folder or again upload to wherever that sits. Press OK on that. Select that. May just take a moment. There we go. So again, uploading the RAD spec. I've satisfied where that sits in the project. I'm going to submit the official response, and the process just continues on again. I'm not going to show you what that is again. I'm going to see spec. Pretty simple. Go through the process again. That's the RAD spec. Change rooms. Now come back to the manager in this case, and then they can submit it back to the plumber or whoever created it in the first instance as well. Inside RFIs then, just to show you how the workflows work in the background. So with RFIs, you be, I suppose, to manage RFIs and have the control of the workflows, you have to be what's known as a project administrator, which the architect is not. So they're restricted from that. But the person managing the platform, which is myself here, I can come back into RFIs and I can come into settings. So because I'm an administrator, I can see this. I can go into permissions. So these are the permissions that are built into those workflows. And these are important to understand because, like the roles I mentioned at the start, you have an architect. In this case, they're the reviewer, the document manager. I can also make someone a coordinator. I'll show you that workflow in a moment. And in this case, the main contractor, Best Builders, they are the manager of this. And the company mechanical people, they're the creators of these RFIs. So I can also, at any point, I can go, okay, well, it's not only mechanical people limited that are going to be submitting RFIs. I also need, I need a fire safety company, for example, Fire Safety Limited. They need to be able to either create, manage, coordinate, or review RFIs. You build up this in the background at the start of your project, and that controls those permissions of who has those roles. So maybe I want, Fire Safety Limited to be a reviewer, so they'll receive RFIs from site potentially about clarifying, fire stopping, fire doors, and specs, and all of that fantastic stuff as well. So Fire Safety Limited, I'm adding their role to the RFI template. So these are just admin settings that you need to set up at the start of your project, and you can define who these people are. So that's why I said at the start, the workflows are fairly, I suppose, malleable in terms of you can choose who has these roles on a project and who controls what. And because, for example, the architect is only set to be a reviewer. So if I come back in, if I come back in here as a reviewer, as the architect will only see the RFIs that are relevant to them, because they're only in it as, they're only included in it as a reviewer. They won't necessarily see RFIs that are for the structural engineer or for the fire consultant unless they need to. you know, obviously, you know, with design changes, you're going to have different consultants as well. They can be brought into the process. But the key thing to understand is that it's customized to whoever's logged in and whoever is part of those roles and whoever is part of those workflows as well. So if we just, again, come back here. So let's say you've defined these roles, you know, there are going to be lots of different people on your project. The best way to actually, I know I've defined it by an individual here, but using companies to define who has a role, that means that anyone in that company will inherit that role. So, you know, Mechanical People Limited, if there's 50 people working for that company, they'll all be creators. Or, you know, the same for Best Builders, anyone in that company will be a manager. And you can obviously control that by individual though as well. I could, if I wanted to change the manager to just be a single individual, or maybe I want the document manager, for example, to also be a manager and a coordinator as well. So it's just about controlling the roles depending on the complexity, scale, and size of your own project. Within those roles, then they relate back to those workflows that we looked at. And if I just come into RFI types, what you notice there is I had a couple of different workflows built. The workflow that we looked at was it starts with the creator, but then it's the manager that sends it to the reviewer, and the reviewer sends it back to the manager. So that's the process we looked at. If I look at that in a detailed workflow, so the creator creates it, creator, or it can be the manager as well, by the way, that role manager. The manager then submits or returns it. It then goes to the reviewer, that was the architect, back to the manager, construction manager, back to the creator, and it's closed. If obviously there's going to be back and forth on lots of different RFIs, you know, if it comes to the manager, they can choose to close it on behalf of the creator. Maybe they determine it's not relevant. The reviewer can determine to reject or return the RFI, and then the manager in that case can either close or reopen it back to the creator as well. So that's that very simple workflow, and that's the workflow that I used in the demonstration. To show you another type of workflow, and I'll finish on this point. So there is something called a workflow with an RFI coordinator. So what that means is when it comes to the manager, it goes to a coordinator, and before it gets to the coordinator, or before it gets to the designer or reviewer, it comes to the coordinator. So that role can obviously be flexible. I mean, that could be someone on behalf of the designer that's managing all RFIs, and then they determine the specific architect that it needs to go to as well. And then it comes back to the coordinator and then goes to the manager as well. So there's obviously additional steps included in that. And to show you what that looks like, you know, there's a couple more variations of this available. Sorry, I mean, in terms of the workflow working to the previous workflow. So again, starts with the plumber or contractor or subcontractor on site, goes to the manager, and then the coordinator determines, does it need to go to the reviewer, or can we just bypass this designer coordinator, and it can actually go between the manager and the coordinator as well, and then they can close it as well. So you can streamline that by having a coordinator as part of your workflow. And these are just workflow templates. You can have different ones for different types of disciplines, and you can create what I've created 2 workflows in here. This is the default one. I can create more RFIs in here, define the type and the workflow type that it is, either the default workflow or default with RFI coordinator. I can even say who the default reviewer is as part of that as well. And then finally, promise last point, I can create custom fields. So custom fields are potentially questions that you ask on an RFI, so you can create them as custom questions as well. It's not just the out-of-the-box questions that we would have seen there on that particular RFI that I generated. Okay, so I think that is RFIs in a nutshell. Let's see, we've one question. So there's a question: could the RFI system be adapted for use internally if a company, if say the plumber had a question for the engineer working for his own company, not the architect working for the design team, or is there better work to adapt? You certainly can, and that's just done by roles. That's a very good question. So you can adapt RFIs to work internally for a company as well, but by all means, and you can keep out the other individuals that maybe don't need to be a part of it. It's just about defining those roles, and that's how you would set it up for that. But obviously, I mean, a key part of this is using mobile devices on site and leveraging that as well. But obviously, it can be used. You can create RFIs in here. I mean, if you want to, you can create RFIs on desktop. It's not only on the mobile device that you create them as well, but in a lot of cases, it's going to be people on site looking for information, probably in a hurry in most cases. So, I mean, you get instant notifications, all of that's controlled from inside there as well. So just to expand then on the reporting of it, as part of Autodesk Construction Cloud, if you are an account administrator, you get blanket access. So if you own one of these Autodesk build accounts, if you're the main person for this, you can build custom dashboards. What I showed you were PDF dashboards, which is quite effective, but you also get custom dashboards. I'm just trying to remember where this is, in the Insight panel. So I'm coming into the Insight panel, and what I'm going to show you is you can integrate with Power BI as part of this. So there's an official integration, Microsoft Autodesk. So what I can do is I can use something called a data connector, and that will pull out all of my RFI data. And these are all different projects, by the way, that I have here. There's the one that I was on. What I can do is I can link that into my Power BI environment. But as part of that, you can get Power BI templates. And one of them is, if I can find it, is for RFIs. So there. But you can build, sorry, I'm just looking for the one for RFIs. There's not one built, but you can build one for RFIs. And what that means is that you can link in Power BI data. You can, using the data connector, you can push out that raw RFI information. It goes to a CSV file. You can download that CSV file and plug it into a Power BI dashboard. This Power BI dashboard can then be customized to the information you want to report. If the report doesn't do enough in itself, you can customize something like Power BI, and you can connect this back into your environment. I'm just looking for, I do have this connected into one of these. Is there? Oh, I need to sign in. I can't remember which account. So this is a Power BI dashboard now. This is for assets or account admin. But what this will show me is lots of different information regarding my project. Now this is about admin, but it will show me different information about my project, and I can customize those Power BI as well. So that's a live integration. RFIs can also be associated with change orders. So if there's a variation, if the radiator spec has changed from cheap to not so cheap anymore, within the RFI, then I can link that into what's known as cost management into RFI. So let's say that cost spec, the cost to change for, let's say RAD spec for changing rooms. So this is, so what I could do here is I could link it into a PCO. I haven't turned on PCO, so purchase change or potential change order. Sorry, I can link it into a purchase change order and then put it through, requesting a new quote from the supplier and go through that process as well. I could also link an RFI into a delay potentially in a project back to the schedule, into photographs and various different drawings as well. I could link it into a schedule or even into a checklist on site as well. I can say, okay, well, that's related to maybe there's an impact to second fix electrical. I can link it to schedule activity as well. Schedule activity, construction schedule or programming, related back to that as well. And again, this is connected to the RFI and then the schedule area as well. If I go into schedule, this item will be connected to this RFI as well. So what I hope I showed you there was the kind of the bi-directional connection that I can build across the platform. That happens wherever you do it in the platform, whether it's RFIs or checklists or anything like that as well. So that's all possible with inside there as well. If there's no more questions, I will stay on for another minute or two, but I think I'll leave it there and give you back a couple more minutes of your Friday. The recording will be available, Paul. You should receive an email with the link in the next day or two to it.